The hospital corridors stretched endlessly before me that Tuesday afternoon, each step echoing against the polished linoleum like a countdown to my own undoing. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting that cold, sterile glow that makes everything look sickly and unreal. After 30 years as a registered nurse at County General, I should have been immune to the clinical atmosphere. But today I wasn't here as Nurse Sarah Jones. Today I was here as a wife on a mission. I clutched my leather purse against my chest like armor, my knuckles white from gripping the strap so tightly that my wedding ring, 32 years on my finger, cut into my skin. Room 314. I had memorized that number like a prayer, like a curse. It had taken me 3 weeks to work up the courage to come here. 3 weeks of sleepless nights and untouched meals. 3 weeks of watching my husband James slip away from me, one lie at a time. But I was done being the fool, done pretending I didn't know. The scent of disinfectant burned my nostrils as I stood outside her door. Emily Williams, 28 years old. That's all I knew about the woman who had been sharing my husband's bed for God knows how long. 28. I was already 30 when I married James, already building the foundation of what I thought would be our forever. She wasn't even born yet. My hand trembled as I reached for the door handle. Through the small rectangular window, I could see the edge of a hospital bed. White sheets, pristine and tucked tight. I had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in my mirror at home. I would walk in with dignity, my head held high. I would look at her, really look at her, and I would ask her one simple question. Was he worth destroying a family for? I steadied my breathing the way I'd learned during 3 decades as a nurse. In through the nose, out through the mouth. You've seen worse than this, Sarah. You've held dying patients' hands. You've delivered news that shattered families. You can handle looking at one home-wrecking girl in a hospital bed. But nothing could have prepared me for what I saw when I pushed open that door. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the window, casting a golden glow across the room like some twisted romantic movie scene. And there, sitting on the edge of the hospital bed, was my husband, my James, the man who had kissed me goodbye that morning and told me he was going to the office to catch up on paperwork. The man who had been working late every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 6 months. He was holding a plastic spoon, carefully feeding applesauce to the woman lying in the bed. But it wasn't just the feeding that stopped my heart. It was the tenderness in his movements. The way he dabbed at the corner of her mouth with a napkin. The soft murmur of his voice as he whispered something that made her smile. A smile I recognized. It was the same smile he used to give me when I was sick with the flu during our first year of marriage. The same gentle attention he'd shown me when I had my gallbladder surgery 5 years ago. And there, catching the light as he lifted the spoon to her lips, was the watch. The anniversary watch. The one I had saved for 3 months to buy him last year, working extra shifts at the hospital, skipping lunches just to see his face light up on our 31st anniversary. The inscription on the back read, "Forever yours, Sarah." He was wearing it while he fed another woman. Emily wasn't what I had expected. She wasn't some glamorous temptress or sophisticated seductress. She looked young, vulnerable with her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail and no makeup on her face. She looked like someone's daughter. She looked like someone I might have cared for as a patient. And the way James was looking at her, God help me. He was looking at her the way he used to look at me. My purse slipped from my numb fingers. The sound echoed through the room like a gunshot. My wallet, my keys, my reading glasses, all scattering across the hospital floor in a symphony of betrayal. James's head snapped toward the door, the spoon frozen halfway to Emily's mouth. His eyes met mine across that sterile room, and I watched 32 years of marriage die in the space of a heartbeat. His mouth opened, closed, opened again like a fish gasping for air. "Sarah, But I was already backing away, my hand fumbling for the door frame behind me. I couldn't breathe. The antiseptic smell was choking me. The fluorescent lights were too bright. The sound of my own heartbeat was deafening in my ears. This wasn't supposed to happen. I was supposed to be the one in control. I was supposed to confront her, not him. Not like this. Not seeing him care for her the way he had once cared for me. I turned and ran. My nursing shoes squeaked against the linoleum as I fled down the endless corridor, past the nurses' station where my colleagues would have recognized me, past the visitors clutching flowers and balloons, past all the normal people living their normal lives, while mine exploded behind me in room 3 on 14. I didn't stop running until I reached my car in the parking garage. Only then did I allow myself to fall apart, gripping the steering wheel as sobs tore through my chest like daggers. 32 years. 32 years of cooking his favorite meals, ironing his shirts, supporting his dreams, raising his children, building his home. 32 years. And he was feeding applesauce to a girl young enough to be our daughter. As I sat there in the dim parking garage, something shifted inside me. The tears stopped. The shaking stopped. And for the first time in months, my mind became crystal clear. I went to that hospital to look my husband's mistress in the eye, but what I saw in that room changed everything. Because I realized that this wasn't just about an affair. This was about a man who could sit beside another woman's hospital bed and tend to her with the same hands that had once promised to cherish only me. This was about betrayal so deep, so complete, that it required something more than tears. It required strategy. And lucky for me, I had just learned exactly what I was up against. But let me take you back to the beginning, because you need to understand what was destroyed in that hospital room. You need to know what 32 years of devotion looks like when it crumbles in a single moment. I met James when I was 28, fresh out of nursing school and working the night shift at County General. He was 26, a first-year law student with holes in his shoes and dreams bigger than his empty wallet. He used to come into the hospital cafeteria at 2 a.m., nursing a single cup of coffee for 3 hours while he studied under the fluorescent lights. I thought he was homeless at first. "Just poor," he told me that first night I approached him with an extra sandwich from my dinner break. But not for long. I believed him. More than that, I invested in him. While other women my age were dating men with established careers and steady paychecks, I was falling in love with potential. I was working 60-hour weeks as a nurse while James buried himself in law books, and I didn't mind. When his student loans weren't enough to cover both tuition and rent, I picked up extra shifts. When he needed suits for interviews, I shopped clearance racks and learned to tailor them myself. When he was too stressed to cook or clean or remember to eat, I became his everything. "You're building our future," I used to tell myself during those exhausting double shifts, my feet aching in those uncomfortable nursing shoes, my hands raw from constant hand washing. This sacrifice means something. For 3 years, I lived on 4 hours of sleep and instant ramen, so James could focus on becoming the lawyer he dreamed of being. I watched him graduate summa cum laude from the same hospital cafeteria where we met, tears streaming down my face as he walked across that stage. He found me in the crowd afterward, lifted me up and spun me around, and whispered in my ear, "We did it, baby. We actually did it." We got married 2 months later. Those early years of his career were lean but hopeful. We lived in a tiny apartment with paper-thin walls and a bathroom door that wouldn't close properly, but we were building something together. I kept working nights so I could be awake when he came home so we could share dinner and talk about our days. He was working at a small firm then, taking any case they'd give him, learning the ropes and dreaming of partnership. "One day we'll have a house," he promised me as we lay in our second-hand bed, listening to our neighbors argue through the walls. "A real house with a garden for you and an office for me. We'll fill it with kids and laughter and everything we never had growing up." I believed every word. By the time James made partner 8 years later, we had our house, a beautiful colonial with 4 bedrooms and the garden he'd promised. We had our children, too. Marcus, born when James was finally stable in his career, and Jasmine, who came 2 years later when we thought our family was complete. I switched to day shift so I could be home with them in the evenings, helping with homework and cooking family dinners and creating the life we both dreamed of. Those were the golden years. James would come home from the office and tell me about his cases over dinner, while Marcus and Jasmine chattered about school and friends and weekend plans. We went on family vacations to Disney World and the beach, took Christmas card photos in matching sweaters, hosted neighborhood barbecues in our backyard. I thought we had made it. I thought we were living proof that love and hard work could build something lasting. But children grow up. Dreams evolve. And apparently, so do the people you build your life around. Marcus graduated college 3 years ago and moved to Chicago for his engineering job. Jasmine finished her master's degree last spring and took a position in Seattle. Suddenly, our 4-bedroom house felt cavernous and quiet. The dinner table that once buzzed with conversation now seated 2 people who seemed to have run out of things to say to each other. This is our time now, I told James that first week after Jasmine moved out. We can travel, take up hobbies together, remember what it was like before kids. But instead of growing closer, we seemed to drift further apart. It started with small things. James began working later, claiming new clients needed extra attention. He changed his phone password, something he'd never done in 28 years of marriage. He started buying expensive cologne, styling his graying hair differently, wearing shirts I'd never seen before. When I complimented his new look, he brushed off my comments like they embarrassed him. Just trying to stay current, he'd mumble, avoiding my eyes. The late nights became routine. 3 nights a week became 4, then 5. He'd come home after I was already in bed, slip under the covers smelling like that new cologne, and whisper that he'd eaten dinner at the office. In the morning, he'd be gone before I woke up, leaving only a coffee mug in the sink and a hastily scribbled note about another late day ahead. Our conversations became functional. The lawn needs cutting. Your mother called. Don't wait up tonight. We moved around each other like polite strangers sharing the same space. And when I tried to address it, he accused me of being clingy. We're not 20-somethings anymore, Sarah, he said one evening when I suggested we go out for dinner like we used to. We don't need to be attached at the hip. But I wasn't asking to be attached at the hip. I was asking to feel like his wife instead of his housekeeper. The final warning sign came 6 months ago. I had surprised him at his office with lunch from his favorite deli, something I used to do regularly when the kids were small. His secretary, Mrs. Patterson, looked confused when I introduced myself. Mrs. Jones? But I thought... She caught herself, her face flushing red. Oh, you're James's wife. Of course, he's in a meeting right now. Through his office window, I could see him on the phone, alone, laughing at something whoever was on the other end had said. It was the kind of laugh I hadn't heard from him in months. Genuine, delighted, completely absorbed. When he saw me standing there with the bag of food, his face fell like I'd caught him doing something wrong. Sarah, what are you doing here? Not what a nice surprise or thanks for lunch. Just confusion and something that looked almost like annoyance. I should have demanded answers then. I should have confronted the growing distance, the secret phone calls, the way he'd started treating our marriage like an obligation instead of a choice. But I was a nurse, trained to care for others before myself. I was a mother, programmed to keep the peace and hold the family together. I was a wife who had spent 32 years believing that love and loyalty were enough to weather any storm. So, I handed him his lunch with a smile, kissed his cheek, and pretended not to notice how quickly he pulled away. That's what 32 years of devotion looks like when it's taken for granted. You become invisible in your own life, a background character in someone else's story. You work and sacrifice and build and nurture until you've given so much of yourself away that there's barely anything left. But that day in the hospital, watching my husband feed applesauce to another woman while wearing the watch I'd saved months to buy him, that was the day I remembered who I used to be before I became James's everything. That was the day I decided to take myself back. But taking yourself back requires knowing exactly what you're taking yourself back from. And that meant I had to stop being willfully blind to what was happening in my own marriage. It started with his phone. For 32 years, James and I had shared everything. Passwords, bank accounts, dreams, fears. We were partners in the truest sense. So when he suddenly became protective of his phone, Holding it face down during dinner and taking it with him to the bathroom, my nursing instincts kicked in. Something was wrong, and I needed to diagnose the problem. The opportunity came 3 weeks after that disastrous office visit. James had rushed out of the house for an emergency meeting, leaving his phone charging on the kitchen counter. My heart pounded as I picked it up, my fingers trembling as I entered what I hoped was still his passcode. Our wedding anniversary. It worked. I scrolled through his contacts with the methodical precision I'd learned from 20 years of reading patient charts. Most of the names were familiar, colleagues, family members, our mutual friends. But then I saw it, tucked between Larry from gym and Mom, Emily with a heart emoji. My breath caught in my throat as I clicked on the contact. The phone number meant nothing to me, but seeing it there, seeing her name in his phone with that little red heart, made everything real in a way I wasn't prepared for. This wasn't paranoia or middle-aged insecurity. This was confirmation. I quickly memorized the number and put the phone back exactly where I'd found it, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped it twice. When James returned an hour later, I was folding laundry in the living room, acting like the dutiful wife who suspected nothing. "How was your meeting?" I asked without looking up from his shirts. "Fine, just fine." His voice sounded strange, strained. "Client emergency, you know how it is." But I was beginning to suspect I didn't know how anything was anymore. The next day, while James was at work, I did something I never thought I'd do in 32 years of marriage. I went through his things. Not snooping, I told myself. Investigating. There's a difference when your whole life is at stake. I started with his dresser, methodically checking pockets and drawers with the same thoroughness I used to inventory medical supplies. In the back of his sock drawer, hidden beneath winter thermal underwear he hadn't worn in years, I found them. Receipts, dozens of them, all from jewelry stores I'd never been to for items I'd never received. My hands trembled as I spread them across our bed. Tiffany earrings, $1,200. Pandora bracelet, $850. A necklace from KJ Jewelers, $2,300. The dates went back 8 months, and the total amount made my stomach lurch. We were talking about thousands of dollars. Money from our joint account. Money I'd helped earn during all those extra nursing shifts. But the receipt that nearly broke me was the smallest one. A simple gold chain from a boutique downtown, purchased just 2 weeks ago. Written on the back in James's handwriting was a note. For E, until you're feeling better. Love always, J. Love always. I sat on our bed, the bed where we'd made love, raised babies, whispered dreams, and felt something die inside my chest. This wasn't just physical betrayal. This was emotional intimacy, financial deception, and something that looked suspiciously like love. That night, I pretended to read while James worked on his laptop in the living room, but I was actually listening, training my nurse's ear to catch every word, every inflection, every pause in his conversations. Around 10 o'clock, his phone rang, and I heard him answer in a voice I hadn't heard him use with me in years, soft, concerned, infinitely tender. "Hey, beautiful. How are you feeling tonight?" I gripped my book so tightly the pages wrinkled. I know. I wish I could be there too. But visiting hours are almost over and you need your rest. Visiting hours. My blood turned to ice water. The doctor said what? No, that's normal after what you've been through. You're going to be fine, I promise. I'll be there first thing tomorrow morning. I heard him moving around, probably pacing the way he did when he was worried about something important. "Emily, listen to me. You're going to get through this. We're going to get through this. I'm not going anywhere. You hear me?" The call lasted 20 more minutes, filled with reassurances and promises, and the kind of intimate conversation married couples have during health scares. Except he wasn't having it with his wife. He was having it with a woman whose name I'd found in his phone with a heart emoji. When he hung up, I heard him typing furiously on his laptop. I crept to the top of the stairs and listened as he made another call. "Dr. Martinez? James Jones. I'm calling about Emily Williams. Yes, I'm her emergency contact. I wanted to check on her progress and see if there's anything else she needs." Emergency contact. The words hit me like a physical blow. In all our years of marriage, I had been James's emergency contact. He had been mine. It was one of those small, intimate details that meant everything. The person who would be called if something terrible happened. The person trusted to make life or death decisions. And he had given that role to someone else. The next morning, after James left for work earlier than usual, I called in sick to the hospital for the first time in 3 years. Instead of caring for patients, I was about to become my own detective. I had a name, a phone number, and the knowledge that this Emily person was in some kind of medical situation. It was time to find out exactly what I was dealing with. I drove to the courthouse where James worked, parking across the street with a clear view of the exit. At 10:30 a.m., I watched my husband walk out of the building, get in his car, and drive in the opposite direction of home. I followed him through downtown traffic, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it over the radio. He led me straight to Mercy General Hospital. I watched from the parking garage as he walked through the main entrance carrying flowers and what looked like a small gift bag. He moved with purpose and familiarity. This wasn't his first visit. I waited 15 minutes, then followed him inside, staying far enough behind to avoid being seen, but close enough to track his movements. The elevator stopped on the 3rd floor, cardiac and trauma recovery. I approached the nurses' station, using my professional credentials to access limited information. "I'm looking for a patient named Emily Williams," I told the charge nurse. "I'm Sarah Jones from County General, and her family asked me to check on her." "Oh yes, room 314. Poor thing was in a terrible car accident 2 weeks ago," the nurse said sympathetically. "Her fiancé has been here every day. Such a devoted man. Her fiancé." The floor tilted beneath my feet. "Yes, very devoted," I managed to say. "Are you family too?" the nurse asked kindly. I looked down the hall toward room 314, where my husband was probably sitting beside another woman's bed, holding her hand and whispering the same sweet words he used to whisper to me. "Something like that," I said. As I walked back to my car, everything clicked into place with terrible clarity. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the expensive jewelry, the emergency contact status. James wasn't just having an affair, he was living a double life. And worse than that, he was playing the role of devoted partner to a woman in the hospital while his actual wife sat at home, completely unaware that she'd been replaced. But here's what James didn't know about the woman he'd married 32 years ago. Nurses are trained observers. We notice details, track patterns, and most importantly, we don't give up when a patient's life is on the line. And my life was definitely on the line. That night I sat at my kitchen table staring at the evidence I'd gathered. Jewelry receipts, notes I'd taken about his phone calls, the hospital information. What I was looking at wasn't just an affair. This was systematic deception on a level that made my 32 years of marriage feel like an elaborate lie. But I needed more information before I could act. I needed to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. The next morning, I called the hospital back and spoke to a different nurse on the cardiac floor. "I'm trying to coordinate flowers for Emily Williams in room 3114, I said, using my most professional voice. "Can you tell me what name to put on the card for her husband?" "Oh, you mean James? James Jones. Such a sweet man. He's been here every single day since she was admitted. Even sleeps in that uncomfortable chair sometimes. You can tell how much he loves her." The words hit me like a physical blow. He was using his real name. He wasn't even bothering to create a false identity. He was just living as himself with another woman while I existed in some parallel universe where I still believed I was his wife. "They make such a lovely couple," the nurse continued. "He told me they're planning to get married once she recovers fully. After 2 years together, he said it's time to make it official." 2 years. The phone nearly slipped from my numb fingers. 2 years? I managed to whisper. "Yes, that's what he told Dr. Martinez. They've been together for 2 years, and he's been taking care of her through some difficult times. Financial stress, family issues, you know how it is. But he stood by her through everything. That's real love." I hung up without another word. 2 years meant this started when Jasmine was finishing her master's degree. 2 years meant he'd been building a life with another woman while I was planning our empty nest phase. 2 years meant every late night at the office, every weekend emergency meeting, every time he'd been too tired for conversation or intimacy with me, he'd been saving his energy for her. But I still needed proof. Concrete, undeniable evidence that would hold up in divorce court and in my own shattered heart. That afternoon, while James was at the hospital playing devoted fiancé, I did something that would have horrified the trusting wife I'd been just weeks ago. I called my sister Olivia. Olivia had always been the tough one in our family. While I went into nursing to care for people, she became a private investigator to expose their lies. We'd grown apart over the years, partly because James never liked her cynical attitude about marriage and relationships. Now I understood why she'd always seemed skeptical when I talked about my perfect husband. "Sarah, my God, when was the last time you called me?" Olivia's voice was warm but surprised. "Too long," I admitted. "Olivia, I need your help, professional help." "What's going on?" I told her everything. The phone calls, the jewelry receipts, the hospital visits, the emergency contact revelation. Olivia listened without interruption, and I could practically hear her investigator brain cataloging every detail. 2 years, she said finally. "This isn't some midlife crisis affair, Sarah. This is a parallel life. How much do you know about this Emily person?" "Almost nothing. Just her name, her age, and that she's in the hospital." "Give me 48 hours, Olivia said. "I'll find out everything there is to know about Emily Williams and exactly how deep this goes." Olivia worked fast. Too fast, really, for the kind of news she had to deliver. "Sarah, you need to sit down for this," she said when she called me back 2 days later. I was already sitting in my car outside the grocery store, afraid to have this conversation in the house where James might come home early. Her full name is Emily Williams, 28 years old, works as a customer service representative at a call center downtown. But here's what's going to hurt, sis. I found an apartment lease. My blood turned to ice. "What kind of lease?" "A 2-bedroom apartment on Maple Street. Both their names are on it. James Jones and Emily Williams. The lease started 23 months ago, and the rent is $2,800 a month. He's been paying for it out of an account I traced back to your joint savings." The numbers hit me like successive punches. 23 months, went down to $800 every month. That was over $40,000 of our money. Money I'd helped earn. Money I'd assumed was going toward our retirement, our future security. "There's more," Olivia continued gently. "I talked to some neighbors. They know him as Emily's boyfriend, then fiancé. He's there most weekends, sometimes during the week. They've seen him bringing groceries, helping her with household repairs, acting like a live-in partner. So he's been maintaining 2 households, 2 lives." My voice sounded strange and hollow to my own ears. "It gets worse, Sarah. The car accident. I pulled the police report. She was leaving his apartment when it happened. And get this, the emergency room intake form lists her as engaged to James Jones. He filed that paperwork himself. I sat in that grocery store parking lot, watching normal people live their normal lives, and felt my entire reality crumble around me. This wasn't just betrayal. This was systematic replacement. While I'd been living as his wife, he'd been creating an entirely separate existence where I didn't exist at all. "What are you thinking?" Olivia asked softly. "I'm thinking," I said slowly, "that for 32 years I've been playing by rules that only I was following." "What do you want to do about it?" The question hung in the air between us. What did I want to do? Confront him directly? Demand explanations for the unexplainable? Beg him to choose me over a woman 28 years old who'd been playing house with my husband for 2 years? The old Sarah would have done exactly that. The old Sarah would have cried and pleaded and tried to win back a man who'd already decided she wasn't worth staying faithful to. But sitting in that parking lot, holding evidence of the most devastating betrayal I could imagine, I realized something important. I didn't want him back. I wanted justice. I want to expose him, I said. I want everyone who thinks he's this devoted, loving man to see exactly who he really is. I want consequences. Real ones. Now you're talking like my sister, Olivia said, and I could hear the approval in her voice. But we're going to be smart about this. No emotional confrontations, no dramatic scenes until we're ready. We're going to gather everything: financial records, proof of the double life, documentation of his lies, and then we're going to take him apart, piece by piece. What do you need from me? Access to your financial records, his computer if possible, and most importantly, I need you to act completely normal until we're ready to move. Can you do that? Can you smile and play the loving wife while we build our case? I thought about the man who would come home tonight, probably tired from spending the day at another woman's bedside, who would expect me to heat up his dinner and ask about his day and pretend I didn't know he was living an elaborate lie. I can do that, I said. I've been playing the loving wife for 2 years while he built a life with someone else. I can keep playing it for a few more weeks. Good, because when we're done, James Jones is going to learn what happens when you underestimate a woman who's been taking care of people her whole life. We're about to show him that nurses know how to fight for their patients' lives. And I'm the patient? Your own life, Sarah. Your dignity, your financial security, your future. Everything he tried to steal from you while you weren't looking. As I drove home to cook dinner for a man who was engaged to another woman, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Not hope that my marriage could be saved, that died in the hospital room, but hope that I could survive this. Hope that I could come out stronger. And hope that James Jones was about to learn exactly what kind of woman he'd been betraying for 2 years. The morning air was cool against my face as I stepped through the sliding glass doors of County General. I'd called in for a late shift, something I'd rarely done in 3 decades of nursing. The familiar antiseptic smell and the steady beeping of monitors should have been comforting. This was my domain, my place of expertise. But today, I was here with a different mission. Sarah, Maria Rodriguez, the charge nurse on cardiology and my friend of 20 years, waved me over to the nurses' station. I thought you weren't in until 3. I forced a smile, hoping the tremor in my hands wasn't visible. I'm not. I actually need a favor, Maria. A professional consult. Maria's smile faded slightly, her dark eyes studying my face. Everything okay? Not really, I admitted, lowering my voice. But I need this to stay between us. She nodded, leading me to the small break room at the end of the hall. I'd been in this room thousands of times, celebrating birthdays, crying over difficult cases, grabbing 5 minutes of peace during chaotic shifts. But I'd never used it for anything like this. I need some information about a patient at Mercy General, I said once the door was closed. Emily Williams. She was admitted about 3 weeks ago after a car accident. Maria's eyebrows shot up. Sarah, you know I can't just pull records from another hospital. I'm not asking for full records, but I have reason to believe her case involves... I swallowed hard, the words sticking in my throat. It involves my husband. Maria's expression softened with immediate understanding. In a hospital, you see the full spectrum of human behavior, the heroic and the heartbreaking. And infidelity was a story she'd heard many times before. What do you need to know? Just the basics. The nature of her injuries, why she's still hospitalized 3 weeks after a car accident. I hesitated. And if there's anything unusual about her case. Maria nodded slowly. Let me see what I can find out. I have a colleague at Mercy who owes me a favor. Give me an hour. 60 minutes later, I sat across from Maria in the same break room, clutching a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. Her face was grim. I spoke with Karen in psychiatric services at Mercy, she said quietly. She couldn't share the full file, but she confirmed some details because she's concerned about the patient's welfare. Psychiatric services? I repeated. I thought she was in trauma recovery. She was transferred to the psychiatric floor 3 days after admission. Maria took a deep breath. Sarah, it wasn't just a car accident. The initial report listed it that way, but the attending physician noted something concerning during intake. When the patient regained consciousness, she became agitated and made statements indicating the crash might have been intentional. My coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. Intentional? You mean The police report shows she drove directly into a concrete barrier at about 35 miles per hour. No skid marks, no attempt to brake. I set the cup down, my fingers suddenly numb. A suicide attempt. Maria nodded grimly. According to Karen, the patient eventually admitted during psychiatric evaluation that she couldn't take waiting anymore. Apparently, there was an argument with her boyfriend. My husband, I corrected quietly, about when he would leave his wife. Maria continued, her voice softening with compassion. She told the psychiatrist that she thought if something happened to her, he would finally realize how much he loved her. My stomach clenched. She tried to kill herself to manipulate him into leaving me. That's how it appears, Maria confirmed. Karen said there are notes about ongoing emotional instability. The boyfriend, she stumbled over the word. James has been advocating for extended inpatient psychiatric treatment. Extended inpatient treatment? As in commitment? Potentially, yes. For someone who's demonstrated suicidal behavior and ongoing emotional instability, a 72-hour psychiatric hold could be extended. I stared at her, pieces clicking together in my mind like a horrific puzzle. Maria, what would happen if someone was found to be mentally incompetent? Legally speaking? She frowned. Well, they'd need a guardian to make decisions for them. Medical, financial, legal decisions. Usually a family member or spouse. Or fiancé, I whispered. Yes, potentially. Sarah, what's going on? I stood abruptly, my chair scraping against the linoleum floor. I need to make a phone call. Thank you, Maria. I owe you. She caught my arm as I reached for the door. Whatever you're thinking, be careful. And Sarah, if you need a place to stay, my guest room is always open. I nodded, throat tight with unexpected emotion. It had been years since anyone had offered to take care of me instead of the other way around. In my car, I called Olivia, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. I need you to look into something else, I said without preamble. James has been pushing for Emily to receive extended psychiatric treatment. I need to know if he's been making similar suggestions about me. What kind of suggestions? Olivia asked, instantly alert. See if he's been building a case to have me declared mentally incompetent. Check hospital records, financial transactions, conversations with mental health professionals, anything that might indicate he's planning to take control of my medical or financial decisions. Jesus, Sarah, you think he's trying to have you committed? I don't know, but Emily tried to kill herself, and now he's pushing for her to be held for psychiatric evaluation. What if I'm next? I'm on it, Olivia promised. Don't go home. Meet me at my office in an hour. Olivia's downtown office was nothing like I'd imagined. Instead of the dark, cluttered space from detective novels, it was bright and modern, with sleek furniture and cutting-edge technology. 3 computer screens dominated her desk, all displaying different data streams. You've been busy, she said, motioning me to a chair. So have I. She pulled up a series of bank statements on the center screen. 3 major withdrawals from your joint savings account in the past month, all for medical expenses not covered by insurance. The numbers made my stomach lurch. $15,000 for psychiatric consultation and extended care evaluation. $7,000 for private room upgrade and specialized nursing. $12,000 for what was listed as experimental therapy consultation. He's been paying for private psychiatric treatment, Olivia said. But here's the interesting part. She handed me a transcript she'd somehow obtained of James's conversation with Mercy Hospital's financial services. I read it aloud, my voice growing fainter with each word. Mr. Jones inquired about payment plans for extended psychiatric care for 2 patients. He specifically asked about procedures for when family members need to make financial decisions for relatives who are not mentally competent to handle their own affairs. 2 patients. He's been planning to have both of us declared mentally incompetent, I said. the full scope of his manipulation finally becoming clear. Emily because of her suicide attempt and me because of supposed emotional difficulties during our separation. And if you're both declared incompetent, guess who gets to make all the financial and legal decisions? Olivia's voice was hard. The elegant cruelty of it took my breath away. James hadn't just been having an affair. He'd been orchestrating a complete takeover of everyone's lives, positioning himself as the rational, responsible man, surrounded by unstable women who needed his protection and control. But he made one critical mistake, Olivia said, gathering the medical records and financial documents. He documented everything, every signature as Emily's fiancé, every payment from your joint account, every conversation about mental competency. It's all evidence of fraud. What kind of fraud? Financial fraud, insurance fraud, and potentially conspiracy to commit guardianship fraud. He's been using your money to pay for another woman's medical care while simultaneously building a case to have you declared incompetent. That's not just adultery, Sarah, that's criminal. I looked at the evidence spread across Olivia's desk. Proof that the man I'd loved for 32 years was plotting to erase my autonomy, my dignity, and my right to make decisions about my own life. So what do we do now? I asked. Olivia's smile was sharp and predatory. Now we turn his own plan against him. He wants to play the game of mental competency? Let's show him what a truly strategic mind looks like when it's fighting for survival. How do we do that? We give him exactly what he's been planning. A public confrontation where everyone can see who's really stable and who's been living in a fantasy world built on lies. She was right. James had been so busy manipulating the narrative that he'd forgotten one crucial detail. The woman he was trying to destroy had 30 years of experience keeping people alive under pressure, and I was about to show him exactly what that experience looked like when the stakes were my own life. The plan Olivia and I devised was elegant in its simplicity. Give James exactly what he wanted. A public forum to play the concerned husband dealing with an unstable wife, and then systematically destroy that narrative in front of everyone who mattered to him. We need witnesses, Olivia explained as we planned every detail. Not just family, but colleagues, friends, people whose opinions he values. When we expose him, it needs to be complete and irreversible. But first, we needed to understand exactly how deep his financial deception went. He's been siphoning money for at least 2 years, Olivia said, spreading bank statements across her dining room table. We'd moved our operation to her apartment, a sleek downtown loft that seemed fitting for a woman who made her living uncovering other people's secrets. The apartment lease, the jewelry, Emily's medical expenses, it all adds up to nearly $120,000. I stared at the figure, feeling physically ill. That's our retirement savings. And there's more, Olivia continued, pulling out a folder of real estate documents. He's been looking at houses, 3-bedroom ranches in Oakwood Heights, all showing double sinks in the master bath, walk-in closets, and home offices. Oakwood Heights was an upscale suburb on the opposite side of town from our colonial home, far enough away that we'd never accidentally run into each other at the grocery store. He's planning to move there with her, I whispered. Once she's released from psychiatric care, yes, that seems to be the plan. Olivia's voice softened. I'm sorry, Sarah. I shook my head, forcing back tears. Don't be. I need to see this. All of it. There's something else. Olivia hesitated, which was unusual for her. She was usually so direct, so unflinching. He's been meeting with Dr. Richard Bennett. The name wasn't familiar. Who's that? A psychiatrist specializing in geriatric and competency assessments. He's known for his expert testimony in guardianship cases. She slid another document across the table. James has paid him $5,000 for a consultation. I picked up the receipt, dated just 3 weeks ago. The timing wasn't coincidental. It was right after I'd started asking questions about his late nights and secretive behavior. He's building a case against me, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Creating a narrative that I'm emotionally unstable, maybe even delusional. That way, when I inevitably discover the affair in Emily, he can claim I'm having a breakdown. Exactly. And with a respected psychiatrist backing him up, He could potentially gain control of your finances, your medical decisions, maybe even your legal right to contest the divorce terms. Olivia's face was grim. This isn't just a man leaving his wife for a younger woman. This is calculated, systematic fraud. I looked at the mountain of evidence Olivia had compiled, bank statements showing the drain on our shared resources, real estate listings, psychiatric consultations, Emily's medical records. It was overwhelming, both in its volume and in the breathtaking betrayal it represented. How could I have missed this? I asked, more to myself than to Olivia. I'm a nurse. I'm trained to observe, to notice when things aren't right. Because you loved him, Olivia said simply, and because he's had a lot of practice hiding who he really is. She was right. For 2 years, at minimum, James had been living a double life so convincing that neither I nor Emily had suspected the depth of his deception. Each of us had seen only the version of James he wanted us to see. I thought back to all the times he'd been working late or had emergency meetings on weekends. How many of those had been spent in the apartment with Emily? How many family dinners had he rushed through to make it to his other home? How many times had he told me he was too tired for intimacy because he'd already been with her? There's something you need to understand, Sarah, Olivia said, interrupting my thoughts. James isn't just a cheater. He's a manipulator. He's been playing both of you. What do you mean? Look at the timing. He started the relationship with Emily 2 years ago, right when your daughter was finishing graduate school. He knew you'd be focused on helping her transition to her new job in Seattle. He used your maternal distraction as cover to establish his other life. I nodded slowly. And he picked someone young and vulnerable. Someone who would be impressed by a successful older man who wouldn't question why he couldn't leave his wife immediately. Exactly. And when Emily finally started pushing for more commitment, for him to leave you, he mollified her with the apartment lease, with expensive gifts, with promises of a future together. Olivia's eyes were hard. But he never actually left you. He kept his stable home life, his respectable image as a family man, his comfortable routine. He wanted both worlds. And now that Emily's suicide attempt has complicated things, he's trying to control both situations through psychiatric manipulation. The realization was sickening. He's not just a cheater, he's dangerous. Olivia nodded grimly. That's why we need to be careful. This isn't just about exposing an affair. This is about stopping someone who's willing to declare 2 women mentally incompetent to maintain control over their lives. She was right. What James was attempting went beyond betrayal. It was an assault on my personhood, on my very right to autonomy, and I wasn't going to let him get away with it. So what's our next step? I asked. We need to document everything happening in your house, Olivia said. If James thinks you're taking time away to think about things, he might get comfortable enough to make mistakes. Big ones. You mean like bringing Emily into our home? Exactly like that. And if we can record him making statements about your supposed mental instability or discussing his plans for Emily's treatment or anything that shows his intent to defraud you, that's evidence we can use in court. You want to put cameras in my house? The idea made me uncomfortable, despite everything. That house had been my sanctuary for over 20 years. Not me, Olivia clarified. I have a specialist. Tyler is the best in the business. Discreet, thorough, and most importantly, legal. The recordings will be admissible in court because you're consenting to surveillance of your own property. I thought about it for a long moment. The idea of strangers planting cameras in my home, watching my private spaces, felt like another violation. But then I remembered James's voice on the phone with Emily, tender and loving in a way he hadn't been with me in years. I remembered the receipts for jewelry I'd never receive, the plans for a house I'd never live in, the psychiatric evaluations meant to declare me incompetent. Do it, I said firmly. Put cameras everywhere. I want to see exactly what he does when he thinks I'm not watching. Olivia's surveillance specialist, Tyler, turned out to be a soft-spoken woman in her 40s with cropped silver hair and steady hands that moved with military precision. She arrived at Olivia's apartment the next morning carrying what looked like a standard toolkit, but was actually filled with state-of-the-art surveillance equipment. 5 cameras, Tyler said, laying out her plan on Olivia's dining table. Living room, kitchen, master bedroom, guest bedroom, and home office. All motion-activated, all with audio. The feeds will transmit to a secure server, accessible only through a password-protected app. Will James be able to detect them? I asked. Tyler smiled slightly. Not unless he's looking. These aren't nanny cams, Mrs. Jones. This is professional-grade equipment designed for corporate espionage cases. The cameras are disguised as everyday objects, a clock radio, a picture frame, an outlet cover, that sort of thing. And they're legal? I needed to be sure. If we were going to build a case against James, everything had to be by the book. Completely legal, Tyler confirmed. You're the homeowner, consenting to surveillance of your own property. The only limitation is that you can't place cameras in areas where there's a reasonable expectation of privacy for others, like bathrooms or guest rooms where someone is staying. But our bedroom is fine? Yes, it's your bedroom, in your house. Your husband has no legal expectation of privacy from you in that space. It felt surreal, discussing the legalities of spying on my husband of 32 years. But then, it had also felt surreal to discover he was engaged to another woman, so perhaps surreality was my new normal. How do we get the cameras installed? I asked. James works from home 2 days a week. I'll need a 4-hour window when the house is empty, Tyler said. I work fast, but I need to be thorough. These placements need to be perfect, hidden enough that they won't be spotted, but positioned to capture the maximum coverage area. I nodded, formulating a plan. James has a court appearance tomorrow. He'll be gone from 9 to at least 2. Will that work? Perfect. Tyler began packing up her equipment. I'll meet you at your house at 9:15. And Mrs. Jones, bring a bag with a few days' worth of clothes. Once the cameras are active, you'll need to stay away. We don't want to risk your husband becoming suspicious. After Tyler left, Olivia and I worked on the next phase of our plan, my temporary breakdown and departure. You need to seem fragile, not suspicious, Olivia coached. Defeated, not angry. Can you do that? Looking at my reflection in her bathroom mirror, I barely recognized myself. 3 weeks of investigating my husband's betrayal had carved new lines around my eyes and stolen the softness from my face. I've been practicing defeated for years, I said. I think I can manage it. That night, I returned home and began laying the groundwork. When James came in, later than usual, claiming another client meeting, I was sitting at the kitchen table with an untouched cup of tea, staring blankly at the wall. Sarah? He paused in the doorway, coat still on. Everything okay? I don't know, I said softly, not looking at him. I've been thinking a lot today. He approached cautiously, like someone approaching a potentially unstable animal. About what? About us. About how we barely talk anymore. About how you're never home, and when you are, you're somewhere else mentally. I finally looked up at him, letting him see the genuine pain in my eyes. Not pain from losing him. That ship had sailed the moment I saw him with Emily. But pain from the realization that I'd wasted 32 years on someone who could betray me so completely. Sarah, I think you're overreacting, James said, sitting down across from me with a sigh. We're just going through an adjustment period. The kids are gone. We're getting older. Things change. That's exactly what I'm afraid of, I whispered, allowing tears to well in my eyes. I'm afraid we've changed so much that there's nothing left to save. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Guilt, maybe, or recognition of the pain he was causing. But it disappeared so quickly I might have imagined it. What do you want me to say, Sarah? His tone was weary, almost annoyed. I want you to tell me if there's any point in fighting for this marriage, I said. I want to know if you still love me, or if I'm just convenient. The word hung between us like a challenge. James looked down at his hands, and I watched him make a choice. Not the choice to confess, Not the choice to fight for what we'd built together, but the choice to take the easy way out. "Maybe some time apart would be good for both of us," he said finally. "Give us space to figure out what we really want." The ease with which he agreed to separate, the relief I could see in his shoulders, told me everything I needed to know about where his heart really was. "You're right," I whispered, wiping at my eyes. "Maybe I should stay with Olivia for a while, just until we both get some clarity." "How long are you thinking?" "I don't know. A week, 2 weeks, however long it takes to figure out if we still have a marriage worth saving." He nodded, already mentally planning what he'd do with an empty house. "That sounds reasonable?" I packed a bag the next morning while James was in the shower, making sure to include enough clothes for an extended stay. When Tyler texted that she was parked down the street, waiting for James to leave, I felt a surge of nervous energy. This was really happening. I was setting a trap for my own husband. "I'll call you in a few days," I said, hugging James goodbye at the front door. I was playing the role of the confused, heartbroken wife who still loved him despite everything. "Take care of yourself." "You too," he replied, his eyes already distant. "Call me if you need anything." As soon as his car disappeared around the corner, I texted Tyler. "All clear." 3 hours later, our house, the house I'd helped him buy, the house where I'd raised our children, the house that contained 32 years of memories, was wired with hidden cameras, ready to record whatever James did when he thought no one was watching. "It's done," Tyler said, showing me the app on my phone. 5 cameras, all transmitting to the secure server. You can watch from anywhere with an internet connection. I stared at the screen, which showed our empty living room from an angle I'd never seen before, as if I were a small bird perched on the bookshelf. "Thank you," I managed. "Don't thank me yet," Tyler said, her voice suddenly gentle. "What you're about to see may be difficult to watch." She'd set up a command center in the living room with multiple monitors showing feeds from each camera in my house. "Now we wait," Olivia said, settling into the chair next to mine. "And we watch your husband show you exactly who he really is." We didn't have to wait long. At 2:30 p.m. on Sunday, less than 24 hours after I'd left, I watched James's car pull into our driveway. But he wasn't alone. Through the camera positioned to capture the front entrance, I saw him helping a young woman out of the passenger seat. She moved carefully, like someone still recovering from injury, and he supported her with the gentleness of a devoted caregiver. Emily Williams was finally seeing our house. "Deep breaths," Olivia said, watching my hands clench into fists. "Remember, we need him to make mistakes. The bigger, the better." I watched my husband help another woman up the front steps of our home. I watched him unlock the door and guide her inside like she belonged there. I watched him give her a tour of the house I'd decorated, showing her photos of our children, our family vacations, our life together. But the moment that broke something fundamental inside my chest was when the bedroom camera activated. I watched James lead Emily into our master bedroom, the room where we'd made love, where I'd cried over infertility struggles, where we'd whispered dreams and fears and promises. I watched him help her sit on my side of the bed. I watched him bring her water and medication. I watched him kiss her forehead and tell her she could rest as long as she needed. "He's making her comfortable," I said, my voice hollow with disbelief. "He's making a mistake," Olivia corrected. "A big one. Adultery is one thing in divorce court, but bringing his mistress into the marital home while his wife is supposedly just taking space to think? That's abandonment. That's intentional infliction of emotional distress. That's evidence of a man who's already mentally divorced from his marriage." On the monitor, I watched James tuck blankets around Emily with the same care he'd once shown me during my recovery from surgery. I watched him stroke her hair and whisper something that made her smile. I watched my husband treat another woman like she was his wife in the bed, where he'd promised to forsake all others. "How long do we let this go on?" I asked. Olivia looked at the monitors, at the evidence accumulating in real time, at the man who was handing us everything we needed to destroy him in court. "As long as it takes," she said. "He's giving us a gift, Sarah. He's documenting his own betrayal. All we have to do is let him keep talking." And talk he did. Over the next 3 days, those cameras captured conversations that would haunt me forever and give me everything I needed to take my life back. The first morning was almost bearable. I watched James bring Emily breakfast in bed, our bed, and help her with her medication. It hurt, but it was the kind of caretaking behavior I could understand. She was recovering from an accident, after all, and despite everything, I was still a nurse. I could appreciate compassionate care, even when it was being given to the woman who'd stolen my husband. But by the second day, what I was witnessing through those cameras wasn't caregiving anymore. It was replacement. "Oh my God," Olivia breathed, pointing at the bedroom monitor. "Is she going through your jewelry box?" I watched in stunned silence as Emily sat at my vanity, the antique dressing table James had restored for our 10th anniversary, systematically trying on my jewelry. She held up my pearl earrings to the light, the ones James had given me for our 25th anniversary. She fastened my grandmother's gold bracelet around her wrist, admiring how it looked against her skin. "These are beautiful," she said to James, who was watching from the bed with an indulgent smile. "Where did they come from?" "Just some old things that were left here," he said casually. "The previous owner had terrible taste, but a few pieces are worth keeping." Previous owner. The words hit me like a physical blow. I wasn't his estranged wife taking time to think. I wasn't even his ex-wife. In James's narrative, I was just some previous owner who'd left behind unwanted belongings. "Well, I love this bracelet," Emily said, still admiring my grandmother's jewelry in the mirror. "It goes perfectly with my skin tone." "Then it's yours," James said. "Everything in that box is yours now." I gripped the arms of my chair so tightly my knuckles went white. Olivia placed a steadying hand on my shoulder, but her eyes never left the monitors. "We're recording everything," she reminded me quietly. "Let him keep talking." Over the next hour, I watched Emily explore my house like she was shopping for furniture. She moved through our living room, rearranging throw pillows and commenting on which pieces she liked and which needed to go. She stood in front of our family photo wall, 32 years of memories from wedding pictures to baby photos to graduation ceremonies, and pointed to specific frames. "Who are all these people?" she asked James. He glanced at the photos with the detached interest of someone looking at a stranger's vacation pictures. "Just some old family stuff. We'll replace all of this with our own memories." "This woman appears in a lot of them," Emily said, pointing to a picture of me holding newborn Marcus. "She looks familiar. Did I meet her somewhere?" "That's Sarah," James said, and the casual way he spoke my name, like I was an acquaintance he barely remembered, made my chest tighten with rage. "She's just someone I used to know. She lived here before, but that's all over now." Someone he used to know. I had supported this man through law school, raised his children, built his home, shared his bed for 32 years, and I was just someone he used to know. "She's pretty," Emily said, studying the photo of me at our wedding. I was 28 then, radiant in my white dress, looking at James like he was my entire future. "What happened to her?" "She got old," James said with a shrug. "Some people just don't age well. They get comfortable, stop taking care of themselves, stop being interesting. You know how it is." I looked down at my hands that had worked countless double shifts to support his dreams, hands that had changed his children's diapers and held them through nightmares, hands that had cared for thousands of patients over 3 decades of nursing, hands that showed the evidence of a life spent caring for others. "Well, her loss is my gain," Emily said, and I watched her take down our wedding photo and set it aside. "This house has good bones, but it needs a complete makeover. Everything is so dated." "That's exactly what I was thinking," James agreed. "Or we could sell this old place and start fresh somewhere more modern, somewhere that's just ours." The casual way they discussed dismantling my life, selling the house I'd helped buy, erasing the family I'd helped create, was breathtaking in its cruelty. But I forced myself to keep watching as Emily continued her inspection tour. In the kitchen, she opened cabinets and critiqued my dishes. "These plates are hideous, and who needs this many coffee mugs?" She started pulling items out and setting them on the counter. "We'll donate all of this and start over with something more stylish." Those coffee mugs represented years of family breakfasts, lazy Sunday mornings, quiet conversations over late-night cups of tea. Each one had a story, Souvenirs from family vacations, gifts from the children, novelty mugs that had made us laugh. To Emily, they were just clutter to be eliminated. But the moment that truly broke my heart came when she discovered my nursing uniform still hanging in the bedroom closet. "What are these awful things?" she asked, holding up one of my scrubs with obvious disgust. "Work clothes," James said dismissively. Sarah was a nurse. Not exactly a glamorous profession. Not exactly glamorous. 30 years of saving lives, comforting families, working through exhaustion and heartbreak and the daily weight of human suffering. And it wasn't exactly glamorous. "Well, these need to go immediately," Emily said, pulling my uniforms from their hangers. "The whole closet smells like hospital." I watched her bundle my scrubs into a trash bag, along with my comfortable nursing shoes and the cardigan I wore during long night shifts. As she worked, she continued talking to James about their plans. "Once we get rid of all this old stuff, we can really make this place ours," she said. "New furniture, new decorations, maybe knock down some walls to open things up. It'll be like starting completely fresh." "Whatever you want, baby," James said, watching her with obvious adoration. "This is your house now." Your house now. The 4th day of surveillance brought new revelations that made my skin crawl. I watched as James made a series of phone calls from our home office, the same office where he'd once helped our children with homework, where we'd filed our taxes together, where we'd planned family vacations. "Dr. Bennett? James Jones here." His voice was smooth, professional, the same voice he used when speaking to important clients. I wanted to follow up on our consultation regarding my wife's mental health evaluation. I leaned closer to the monitor, my heart racing. This was it, proof that he was actively building a case against me. "Yes, I understand the timeline," James continued. "She's currently staying with her sister, claiming she needs space to think about our marriage. This is consistent with the emotional instability I mentioned during our session." Dr. Bennett must have asked a question, because James paused, his expression contemplative. No history of diagnosed mental illness. But there have been concerning behaviors recently. Mood swings, paranoia, accusations about my whereabouts. Classic signs of perimenopausal depression, as you suggested. I felt my face flush with anger. Perimenopausal depression? My legitimate questions about his late nights and secretive behavior were being twisted into symptoms of a mental health condition. "I'm concerned about her ability to make rational decisions right now," James continued, his voice dripping with false concern. "Especially financial decisions. We have significant joint assets, and in her current state," he trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. "Yes, exactly. I'd like to move forward with the competency assessment as soon as possible. My primary concern is her well-being, of course, but I also need to protect our finances." I turned to Olivia, who was watching with narrowed eyes. "He's setting me up." "He sure is," she agreed grimly. "But he's also handing us evidence on a silver platter. We need to contact Rebecca Foster immediately." Rebecca Foster was the divorce attorney Olivia had recommended. A razor-sharp litigator with a reputation for dismantling manipulative spouses in court. We'd already had an initial consultation, but this new evidence would strengthen our case considerably. An hour later, Rebecca joined us in the surveillance apartment, reviewing the recorded phone call with professional detachment. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 40s, with a sleek bob and the kind of focused intensity that made you believe she never missed a detail. "This is Gold," she said, making notes on a legal pad. "He's creating a fraudulent mental health narrative to gain control of your assets. That's not just underhanded, it's potentially criminal." "What kind of charges are we looking at?" Olivia asked. "Financial fraud, certainly. Attempting to obtain guardianship under false pretenses. Misuse of joint assets. Those payments to Dr. Bennett came from your shared accounts, correct?" When I nodded, Rebecca continued. "We can also add adultery, abandonment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress to the divorce petition." "What's our next step?" I asked. Rebecca tapped her pen against her notepad, thinking. "We need to catch him in the act, not just on camera in your home, but publicly. We need witnesses to his behavior, to his deception. What are you suggesting? Olivia leaned forward, intrigued. A confrontation, Rebecca said simply, but not a private one. We need to expose him in front of people whose opinions matter to him, family members, colleagues, friends, people whose respect he values. Like a family dinner? I suggested, the idea taking shape in my mind. I could suggest one last gathering to discuss our marriage, invite key people. Exactly, Rebecca nodded approvingly. And during that dinner, we present the evidence, not all at once, but piece by piece, letting him dig himself deeper with each attempt to explain. He'll deny everything, Olivia pointed out. Of course he will, Rebecca agreed. But the beauty of this approach is that we'll have irrefutable evidence. The surveillance videos, the financial records, the psychiatric consultations he's arranged. And most importantly, we'll have Emily, or rather evidence of Emily, the other woman he's been presenting as his fiancée while still married to you. The plan took shape quickly after that. I would call James, tell him I'd been doing a lot of thinking during our separation, and suggest a family dinner to discuss the future of our marriage. Given his eagerness to position me as emotionally unstable, he'd likely agree, seeing it as an opportunity to demonstrate his patience with his troubled wife. The guest list was crucial. We needed the right mix of people, those whose opinions James valued, those who might serve as witnesses later if needed, and those who deserved to know the truth about the man they thought they knew. His parents, I said immediately. The elder Joneses had always treated me like a daughter. Ruth Jones had taught me to make James's favorite apple pie. William Jones had helped us move into our first apartment, carrying furniture up 3 flights of stairs without complaint. They deserved to know who their son really was. Your children, Olivia added. They need to hear this from you, not him. You can bet he's been setting the stage with them, too, painting you as emotionally fragile. Rebecca nodded. Also, professional colleagues. His law partner, David Morrison. Maybe a couple of neighbors who've known you both for years. The more respected witnesses, the better. By the time we finished planning, our guest list included James's parents, our children Marcus and Jasmine, who would fly in for the occasion. James's law partner, David, our neighbors, the Hendersons, my nursing supervisor, Janet, and several other people whose respect James valued. Rebecca would attend as my friend, ready to step in with legal documentation when the time was right. What if he brings Emily? I asked suddenly, the possibility hitting me like a bucket of cold water. He won't, Olivia said confidently. He's still playing the role of concerned husband with everyone else. Emily is his secret life, not his public one. And if he does, Rebecca added, that just makes our case even stronger. With the plan in place, I made the call. My hands trembled as I dialed James's number, but my voice was steady when he answered. James, it's me. Sarah. His tone was cautious but hopeful. How have you been? I've been thinking, I said, putting a slight tremor in my voice. About us, about our marriage, about what happens next. And? The eagerness in his voice was almost painful to hear. He wanted out so badly. I think we need to talk, really talk about our future. But not just the two of us. I think we owe it to our families to be honest about what's happening. There was a pause as he considered this. I could almost hear him calculating the optics, a public forum where he could play the role of the patient, understanding husband dealing with an increasingly unstable wife. What did you have in mind? Dinner at the house, this Saturday. Your parents, the kids, maybe a few close friends. One last family gathering before we decide anything. Another pause. I'm not sure bringing everyone into our personal business is the best idea, Sarah. I need this, James, I said, allowing my voice to break slightly. I need to say goodbye properly if that's where this is heading. Please. He sighed, the sound of a man making a noble sacrifice. All right, if it will give you closure, we can do dinner on Saturday. Should I handle the invitations? No, I'll take care of it. I'd like to cook, too. One last time. Like old times. If you're sure. I am. 6 o'clock on Saturday. Will you be there? Of course. As I hung up, I caught Olivia's approving nod. Oscar-worthy performance, she said. He has no idea what's coming. Saturday evening arrived with the kind of perfect autumn weather that would normally have made me happy. Crisp air, golden sunlight, the scent of fallen leaves. Instead, I felt a strange detachment as I stood in the kitchen of what had been my home, preparing a meal for the people I had once considered my family. I'd chosen to make James's favorite dinner, herb-crusted lamb with roasted vegetables, the meal I'd prepared for every special occasion during our marriage. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. This was the last supper of our relationship, and I wanted everything to be perfect. James had been nervously helpful all afternoon, setting the table with our wedding china, opening wine to breathe, straightening pictures that Emily had moved during her redecorating tour. He thought I didn't know about those changes. He thought I was oblivious to the fact that another woman had been sleeping in our bed, wearing my jewelry, planning to erase me from our home. His confidence in my ignorance was almost breathtaking. "Sarah?" James appeared in the kitchen doorway, looking uncommonly handsome in the blue shirt I'd given him for his birthday last year. "Your sister just pulled up, with someone I don't recognize." "That's Rebecca," I said calmly, sliding the lamb into the oven. "She's been helping me process things these past few weeks. I hope you don't mind that I invited her." A flicker of unease crossed his face. "Process things like a therapist?" "More like a friend with good advice," I said vaguely, knowing the revelation of Rebecca's actual profession would come later. "Oh, and your parents are here too. Would you let them in?" The next half hour was a blur of arrivals and introductions. James's parents arrived first, Ruth hugging me tightly while William clasped my hand with both of his. The Hendersons came next, bearing a bottle of wine and concerned smiles. Janet, my nursing supervisor, arrived with flowers. David Morrison, James's law partner, came alone, offering a kiss on my cheek and a sympathetic pat on James's shoulder. Marcus and Jasmine were the last to arrive, having shared an Uber from the airport. Seeing my children, my beautiful grown children who had no idea their father had been systematically betraying their mother, nearly broke my composure. I hugged them fiercely, drawing strength from their familiar scents and solid presence. "Mom, are you okay?" Jasmine whispered in my ear. "Dad said you've been having a hard time." Of course he had. "We'll talk about everything over dinner," I promised, squeezing her hand. At 6:00 p.m. sharp, I called everyone to the dining room. The table was set beautifully, crystal glasses catching the light, candles flickering softly, the good china James and I had received as wedding gifts 32 years earlier. I'd even used the embroidered tablecloth his mother had given us, the one reserved for special occasions. James sat at the head of the table, playing his role as the gracious host, while I served the meal I'd perfected over 3 decades of marriage. The conversation flowed awkwardly at first, everyone aware that this gathering had a purpose beyond simple socializing, but no one quite ready to address it directly. "This looks wonderful, Sarah," David Morrison said, raising his wine glass. "James has told me how much he'll miss your cooking." "Has he?" I said quietly, taking my seat. "That's interesting, because I wasn't aware he'd discussed our personal business with colleagues." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. James's face flushed slightly, but he maintained his composure. "Sarah, I think people are just concerned about us," he said in the patient tone one uses with someone who's being unreasonable. "Of course they are. That's why I asked everyone here tonight." I stood up, my hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins, "because I have some things I need to share with all of you." "Sarah, maybe we should," James started. "Maybe we should what, James? Maybe I should continue pretending that I don't know what's been happening? Maybe I should keep playing the confused, emotionally unstable wife while you rewrite our history?" The dining room fell dead silent. James's eyes darted around the table, calculating how to regain control of the narrative. "Sarah, you're not well. Everyone can see that you're struggling." "What everyone can see," I interrupted, "is a woman who's finally tired of being gaslit by a man who's been living a double life for 2 years. Marcus's fork clattered to his plate. "What are you talking about?" Instead of answering, I walked to the living room and returned with a laptop and a small speaker system that Olivia had set up earlier. I think it's better if I show you rather than tell you. James's face went white. Sarah, what are you doing? I'm telling our family the truth. I connected the laptop to the speakers and pulled up the first audio file Olivia had prepared. Let's start with this conversation from 3 days ago. Emily's voice filled the dining room. Who are all these people in the photos? James's voice followed. Just some old family stuff. We'll replace all of this with our own memories. This woman appears in a lot of them. She looks familiar. Did I meet her somewhere? That's Sarah. She's just someone I used to know. She lived here before, but that's all over now. The silence in the room was deafening. I watched James's mother's face crumble as she heard her son dismiss his wife of 32 years as someone he used to know. Sarah, where did you get this? James demanded, his composure finally cracking. From the surveillance cameras Olivia and I installed in our house before I left. I gestured toward the door where Olivia and Rebecca Foster had just entered. The same cameras that recorded you bringing another woman into our marriage bed. You were spying on me. His voice was outraged, but I could see the fear beneath it. I was documenting criminal behavior, Olivia said, stepping forward with a thick folder. Financial fraud, insurance fraud, and conspiracy to commit guardianship fraud. She spread bank statements across the table next to the dinner plates and wine glasses. James has been using joint marital funds to pay for his girlfriend's medical expenses while simultaneously building a case to have Sarah declared mentally incompetent. David Morrison leaned forward, his lawyer instincts engaged. What kind of medical expenses? Psychiatric treatment following a suicide attempt, Rebecca Foster said, pulling out hospital records. Mr. Jones has been acting as emergency contact and medical decision-maker for Ms. Emily Williams while she receives treatment for intentionally crashing her car. The gasps around the table were audible. James's father pushed back from the table, staring at his son like he'd never seen him before. A suicide attempt? Janet, my nursing supervisor, asked. James, you've been managing medical care for someone who's not a family member? It's not what it looks like, James started. It's exactly what it looks like, Olivia interrupted, playing another audio file. This time it was James's voice. She got old. Some people just don't age well. They get comfortable. Stop taking care of themselves. Stop being interesting. My mother-in-law made a choking sound. But that's not the worst part, I said, my voice steady and clear. The worst part is that he's been telling medical professionals that I'm also mentally unstable and might need psychiatric evaluation. He's been positioning both of us as incompetent so he could control our finances and legal decisions. Rebecca Foster placed a legal document in front of James. These are divorce papers already filed. Sarah is citing adultery, financial fraud, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. She's also filing criminal charges for fraud and identity theft. You can't prove any of this, James said, but his voice lacked conviction. Actually, we can. Olivia held up a flash drive. 3 weeks of video and audio surveillance showing you bringing your girlfriend into the marital home, helping her dispose of Sarah's personal belongings, and planning to sell this house without your wife's knowledge or consent. Marcus stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Dad, is this true? Have you been cheating on Mom? Son, it's complicated. It's not complicated, Jasmine said, tears streaming down her face. It's betrayal. The room erupted in voices, family members demanding explanations, David Morrison asking legal questions, neighbors expressing shock and disgust. In the middle of it all, James sat frozen, watching his carefully constructed narrative collapse around him. There's one more thing, I said. And the room fell quiet again. The divorce settlement includes full ownership of this house, half of all assets including his law practice, and spousal support based on 32 years of marriage. The criminal charges include restitution for all marital funds used for his girlfriend's medical care. Rebecca Foster handed him another set of papers. You're also being served with a restraining order prohibiting contact with Sarah except through legal counsel. As James read the documents, his face cycling through shock, anger, and finally resignation, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, complete control over my own life. "The dinner was delicious, by the way," I said, gathering my purse and walking toward the door. "It's the last meal I'll ever cook for you." And with that, I walked out of the house where I'd spent 32 years being taken for granted, leaving behind a man who'd finally learned the difference between a devoted wife and someone you used to know. 5 months later, I sat in my new apartment, a bright, airy space overlooking the city, furnished with items I'd chosen for myself, reading the final court documents that officially ended my marriage and began my new life. The legal consequences for James had been swift and devastating. The State Bar Association had moved quickly once Rebecca Foster presented evidence of his fraudulent behavior, using client trust account procedures to manipulate medical and financial documents, lying about his marital status on legal forms, and attempting to defraud insurance companies. These weren't just personal ethical lapses, they were violations that struck at the heart of legal practice. "James Jones has been permanently disbarred," Olivia told me over coffee at my favorite new cafe. "His law license is gone, his partnership dissolved, and he owes you $180,000 in restitution for marital funds used fraudulently." The money wasn't what mattered most, though it certainly helped with starting over at 55. What mattered was that his ability to manipulate legal systems, the tool he'd used to try to control both Emily and me, had been permanently taken away. "What happened to the house?" I asked. "Sold, as per the divorce decree. Your half of the proceeds plus the alimony settlement means you never have to work again if you don't want to." But I did want to work. For 3 decades of nursing, caring for patients wasn't just my profession, it was who I was. The difference now was that I was returning to it as Sarah Jones, not as James's wife, who happened to be a nurse. "I start back at County General next week," I told Olivia. "Same hospital where I met him, but this time I'm there for me." The emotional closure had taken longer than the legal resolution. 4 months after the divorce, I'd still wake up expecting to hear James's voice in the kitchen or his car in the driveway. 32 years of shared routine doesn't disappear overnight, even when the person you shared it with turns out to be a stranger. But gradually, I began to understand the difference between a marriage certificate and true partnership. A marriage certificate is just a legal document. It can be signed by people who lie, who manipulate, who take vows they never intend to keep. True partnership requires daily choice, mutual respect, and the kind of honesty that builds trust, instead of destroying it. A man who can lie to his wife for years can lie to anyone about anything, I wrote in my journal one evening, thinking about the colleagues who trusted James, the clients who'd believed in his integrity, the family members who'd looked up to him. Betrayal is never contained to just one relationship. It spreads like an infection, touching everyone who believed in the person behind the lies. The hardest part wasn't grieving the marriage. It was forgiving myself for staying blind to obvious signs for so long. I was a trained medical professional, skilled at recognizing symptoms and diagnosing problems. How had I missed the symptoms of deception in my own home? "Because you loved him," my new therapist explained during one of our sessions. "And love makes us want to believe the best in people, even when evidence suggests otherwise. That's not a weakness, Sarah. That's what makes you good at caring for others." Learning to trust my instincts again took time and practice, but slowly I began to recognize the difference between intuition and paranoia, between healthy skepticism and learned helplessness. As for Emily, I chose to see her as another victim rather than the villain in my story. Through mutual acquaintances at the hospital, I learned she'd entered intensive therapy to address the emotional instability that had led to her suicide attempt. Without James's influence and promises, she was finally getting the help she needed to build a life based on reality rather than fantasy. "She sends her apologies through her therapist," Olivia told me one afternoon. "Apparently she had no idea you didn't know about the relationship. James told her you were already separated and that the divorce was just a formality." Even in his affair, James had been lying to everyone involved. "I hope she finds peace," I said, meaning it. "She's young enough to build something real with someone who's actually available." My new beginning started small but significant. I moved into an apartment I could afford on my nursing salary alone. I bought furniture that reflected my taste, not compromised between his preferences and mine. I joined a book club, took a painting class, and started hiking on weekends with a group of women who became friends rather than obligations. Most importantly, I learned to live for myself instead of living as half of a couple that had never been as united as I'd believed. The nursing supervisor position opened up at County General 8 months after my divorce was finalized. For the first time in my career, I applied for a promotion based solely on my qualifications, not on what would be convenient for my husband's schedule. "The job is yours," Janet told me during the interview. "You've earned it." Standing in the same hospital where I'd met James 33 years earlier, wearing scrubs that no one would throw away as awful, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, pride in my own accomplishments. That evening, I called Marcus and Jasmine to share the news about my promotion. Both of my children had struggled with their father's betrayal, questioning everything they'd believed about love, marriage, and family stability. "Mom, I'm proud of you," Marcus said. "Not just for getting the promotion, but for how you handled everything. You could have fallen apart, but instead you fought back." "I almost did fall apart," I admitted. But then I remembered that I've been taking care of people my whole life. It was time to take care of myself with the same determination. "Do you ever regret staying with Dad for so long?" Jasmine asked. It was a question I'd asked myself countless times. "I regret staying blind to who he really was," I said finally. "But I don't regret the life we built together, because that life gave me you two. And everything I learned about love and sacrifice and resilience, all of that made me strong enough to survive losing him." As I sit here now, a year and a half after that devastating day in the hospital room, I want to leave you with this. If you're watching this story and your gut is telling you something's wrong in your relationship, trust that feeling. Don't make excuses for behavior that doesn't align with promises made. Don't sacrifice your peace of mind for someone else's convenience. 30 years taught me that love without respect isn't love at all. Real love doesn't require you to become smaller, quieter, or more convenient. Real love doesn't ask you to ignore your instincts or doubt your worth. This is Sarah Jones signing off. Not as someone's wife, not as someone's mother, but as myself, a woman who discovered it's never too late to begin again.